Berry and Dolly say, what will we learn today?
Friends. It was a super sunny day and Dolly the ladybird sat staring out of the window. I'm going to eat breakfast, she thought, and then I'll go for a walk in the meadow. She decided to take her wheelbarrow with her. I wonder if I'll find something interesting to take home in my wheelbarrow, she thought to herself. Goodness me, said Dolly. What a lovely red cherry. That's just perfect for my lunch. She tried to lift the cherry into her wheelbarrow, but it was far too heavy. Too heavy for one little ladybird. Just then, Berry the snail appeared. Why the sad face, ladybird? Asked Berry. I can't lift this cherry into my wheelbarrow, Dolly replied. Don't cry, I'll help you, Berry said with a smile. And the two of them picked the cherry up with no trouble at all. Dolly set straight off home with the juicy cherry. Now it was Berry who looked sad. Don't you want to share the cherry with me? The snail said, and stamped his little foot. I did help you. But I found it first, Dolly snapped. You're not having any, it's mine. Berry was very upset. The two of them started to fight over the cherry. It's mine, shouted Dolly. That's not fair, Berry shouted back. They pushed and pulled the cherry until it split in two. Berry and Dolly plopped to the ground. They were very surprised when a green grub crawled out of the cherry.
What have you done to my cherry?
He grumbled.
That cherry was my home. Oh, don't look so upset,
the grub said.
I know where we can find plenty more. You can eat cherries while I find a new home for myself.
Dolly helped the grub into her wheelbarrow, and they all set off to look for the cherry tree. When they arrived, they found the ground around the cherry tree was covered in ripe red fruit. Berry and Dolly jumped for joy. The grub fell fast asleep while Berry and Dolly munched away on fresh cherries, and the time soon flew by. It was getting late, so they decided to go home, but this time with 2 cherries. One for Dolly and one for Berry. The sun was setting by the time they reached Berry's house. They took his cherry out of the wheelbarrow and said goodbye. Berry went inside and waved to Dolly from the window. Berry soon fell fast asleep after such an exciting day. The little snail dreamt about playing in cherries with Dolly and eating until their tummies were full. Then Dolly got back home and went straight to bed. From that day on, Berry and Dolly were the best of friends.
Berry and Dolly say, what will we learn today?
June, the Lily Fairy. One summer morning, Flutter the butterfly girl woke in a bad mood. All she could think about was where she had put the purple glitter pen that she had borrowed from Dolly. And she was also sad because of her giant daisies that were wilting in the sunshine. First I'll bake an apple pie for Bubble for tomorrow. Then I'll look for the pen. And after that I'll water my flowers, Flutter decided. While the pie was baking, Flutter made a jug of custard to go with it. But her cooking did not go well, and the pie crumbled into pieces. Then she heard a loud smashing sound. She hurried outside and saw that one of her shutters had fallen off. "Oh, and this as well!" she shouted and began to cry. Then she heard the sound of quiet humming coming from the lilies. "Oh, goodness! Hello, little lily fairy. My name's Flutter." But the fairy did not respond. "I'm happy you're here, but sadly I'm not in a very good mood today," Flutter sniffled. And as she was talking, she accidentally knocked the jug over and custard spilt into the pie dish. "Great! Now the pie will be fine. I'll just have to serve it with a spoon," she smiled. She was so happy that she grabbed the tiny fairy and spun around on the spot with her. As she spun, she knocked over the spade that was leaning against the wall. She bent over to pick the spade up, but the lily fairy pointed directly at the daisies. "You think I should dig them up?" "Very well, I'll try." She soon dug down to the roots where she found a green grub. "So you're the one little grub making my daisies droop. Go and chew on something else." Then Flutter reburied the daisy roots. She watered them well, and they soon began to straighten their stems. She suddenly saw something twinkle in the soil. "I found the screw that fell out of my window." As quick as a flash, they screwed the shutter back into place. "It's fixed," she said, and went back into the house again. Flutter placed the lily fairy on the table and accidentally knocked a string of pearls off the cupboard. So she got down on her knees to pick up the scattered pearls. Then she had a super surprise. She brushed under the cupboard and accidentally found the purple pen she thought was lost forever. "Hooray! I sorted my pie, cured my daisies, I fixed the window, and now I found the pen!" She laughed with delight. "You see, there was no need to sob," said the lily fairy from nowhere. "You can talk?" Flutter asked with surprise. "Yes, but there was no need until now, because you put everything right on your own." "Not on my own, with your help. I'm so happy that you're here. Everybody is going to Bubbles' house tomorrow, and I'll introduce you to all of them," Flutter enthused. "I won't be here tomorrow," the fairy told her. "I'll wake up in a different lily, where someone is sad and needs me." "Please stay," Flutter pleaded, and she took the lily fairy in her hand. The fairy smiled warmly at the butterfly girl, and then suddenly turned into fairy dust and floated up into the night sky. The next day, Flutter could hardly wait to tell the others about the lily fairy. "It's a shame we couldn't meet her," said Balthazar. "Maybe she'll pay you a visit one day," Flutter smiled.
Berry and Dolly say, what will we learn today?
Butterfly Girls. One spring day, Flutter the butterfly girl was picking wild flowers in the meadow. She plaited them into a crown and placed it on her head. Then, from nowhere, she heard an unfamiliar tinkling laughter. She looked right and she looked left, but she could not see anyone. Suddenly, 7 butterfly girls flew out from behind a tree. "Come with us,"
they giggled.
OK.
Flutter said and flew to join them. The butterfly girls were all pretty but very naughty. They loved to play tricks on people they met. The first was Alfonso.
Give me back my violin!
The cricket shouted because one of the flying butterfly girls had snatched it out of his hands and flown off with it. She played music on it surprisingly well.
Give it back!
Alfonso complained. The butterfly girl handed the violin to another butterfly girl, who handed it to another, and they all made fun of the poor cricket. Flutter didn't like this teasing. In the end, the butterfly girls gave him back his violin and flew on. They rested on a blossoming tree and stuffed their pockets with sweetly scented and brightly coloured pollen. Then they flew over the boys playing a game of badminton.
Look, Stanley,
said Eddie.
they're so pretty.
Balthazar, Bubble, Eddie and Stanley stood staring up at the heavenly creatures with their mouths wide open. But they were not happy for very long. The butterfly girls turned their pockets out and covered the boys in pollen. It made all the beetle boys sneeze terribly. The butterfly girls chuckled and their laughter tinkled in the gentle breeze. They flew on so quickly that Flutter could hardly keep up.
Wait!
Flutter panted and rested on the top of a lilac bush.
Come with us. We're going to fly over to the other side of the hill, all the way to the waterfall. It's so beautiful. You'll see.
One of them chimed.
No, I shan't go with you,
Flutter said firmly.
I live here. I like my friends, and I don't like playing naughty tricks on them. You go, but I'm staying here where I belong.
OK, well, all the best, they called back and flew away. They flew on to new places where they stunned those that they met with their dazzling beauty and then played naughty tricks on them. Flutter watched them go for a while and then smiled as she turned and headed back home. But before she got home, she paid a visit to the cricket. She was happy to see that Alfonso was merrily playing his violin again. Stanley, Balthazar, Eddie, Bubble and Berry were playing hopscotch, and they shouted to Flutter to come and join them. The butterfly girl was happy to see that they had all managed to wash off that sticky pollen.
Berry and Dolly say, what will we learn today?
Bubble has hiccups. One fine day in autumn, Berry, Dolly, Balthazar, Flutter, Stanley and Bubble set off on a walk to the waterfall. Bubble suddenly started to hiccup. Balthazar offered him his water bottle.
Have a drink of water. That'll stop it.
Bubble took a couple of gulps, but his hiccups still didn't stop.
Have a bite to eat,
Dolly told him.
that'll stop it.
Bubble bit into his bread roll, but his hiccups still didn't stop.
Hold your breath for a while, that'll stop it.
Flutter advised. Bubble held his breath for a long while, but his hiccups still didn't stop. In the end, Stanley came up with a plan to make Bubble jump. He hurried off and hid behind a big tree. Just as Bubble was walking past, he jumped out with a shout from behind the tree and gave the flower beetle a fright. In fact, he was so shocked he fell over. And his hiccups stopped. But now Bubble was cross with Stanley.
That was a very mean thing to do. I don't jump out at you from behind trees.
I only wanted to help. I stopped your hiccups.
I still don't like it when people make me jump,
Bubble grumbled. All right, I won't help you next time, the stag beetle shouted back. They all carried on their way and soon arrived at the waterfall.
It looks so lovely,
Bubble shouted, and he ran so fast towards the waterfall that he slipped right in. Stanley caught him by the arms at the very last minute and pulled him out of the water.
Thank you,
Bubble snivelled.
I'm sorry I got so cross.
We need to get home as quickly as we can because Bubble is soaked to the skin. He could catch a chill, Dolly said with concern. They then all heard thunderous footsteps from behind the trees and an enormous lizard appeared right before them.
Don't be afraid of me,
he said.
Which way are you going? I'll happily give you a ride on my back.
The forest friends were delighted by the idea and happily hopped onto the lizard's back. And as they made their way back home, Bubble slowly started to hiccup again. I'm definitely not going to make you jump again. Hiccups can stop just as easily on their own. Exactly what happened. By the time the lizard arrived back at Bubble's house, his hiccups had completely stopped. The little beetle said goodbye to all his pals. After Bubble, the lizard took Stanley and Balthazar to their houses. The stag beetle and the bumblebee thanked him for the ride and waved him happily on his way. Soon after that, they arrived at Dolly's house, where the ladybird girl said goodbye to her friends and hopped off the lizard's back, shortly followed by Berry. Flutter was now the final passenger, and it was getting dark by the time the lizard delivered her back home.
Thanks so much for all your help, lizard,
Flutter said, before stepping into her house, where she went straight to bed.
Berry and Dolly say, what will we learn today?
The Star House. One summer evening, Berry and Dolly were sitting playing cards in Dolly's house when they spotted a bright light over the hill.
What was that? Berry asked. It looked like a shooting star.
A shooting star? Let's go and take a closer look, Dolly suggested. Berry and Dolly held hands and walked in the direction of the strange light. Look over there, Berry! The little snail boy's mouth fell open in surprise. Right on the top of the hill stood a house the shape of a star.
Where did that come from? It wasn't there the other day,
Berry whispered.
You stay here and I'll run and tell the others,
Dolly whispered back, and she flew off to tell Balthazar, Flutter and Stanley. When they were all together, the group of friends crept slowly towards a peculiar house. Stanley knocked on the front door.
A shy girl popped her head around the door. She had long hair that sparkled with tiny stars and golden wings that glistened in the darkness. Berry was the first to speak. "Who are you and how did you get here?" But the girl didn't say a word. "Can we help you?" No answer again. The girl just stood there and said nothing. "All right then, if you're not going to speak, then don't. Come on, let's go home."
Wait a minute, Dolly said. Perhaps she can't speak.
"She can't speak?" the others asked back in amazement. Dolly picked up a stick and scripted a star on the ground. Then she handed the stick to the girl. The little girl reached for the stick and started to draw.
A little harp?
Dolly asked, and the little girl nodded.
You've lost it?
Flutter asked, and the little girl pointed to the window.
It fell out of the window?
The little girl nodded again.
I don't understand,
Balthazar grumbled.
I understand, Dolly said. She lives up in the sky, but she dropped her harp out of the window and she's come down here to look for it.
Then let's help her,
Balthazar suggested. Don't worry, we'll find it, they all told her, and they hurried off into the forest to search for her missing instrument. I can't find it, Berry said with a sorry sigh. I've looked in all the bushes.
I can't find it either, and I've looked absolutely everywhere,
Balthazar added.
I'm going to take a look higher up,
Flutter told them, and she flapped up into the trees.
Here it is! Here it is! I found it!
The little butterfly girl soon shouted. Flutter lifted a little golden harp out of the canary's nest. She carefully handed the harp back to the star girl. The little girl flew back into the house and closed the door. She lifted a sparkling star out of her hair and gave it to Flutter.
Is that for me?
The little butterfly girl asked in surprise, and the star girl nodded. Then she sat in the window and started to play her harp. And as she played, the star house began to lift higher and higher.
She's flying up into the sky,
Dolly said with her eyes wide in wonderment. Soon it looked as tiny as all the other twinkling stars in the night sky. It's a shame that she had to go, Stanley sighed. Flutter took very good care of her twinkling star. She kept it in a little box and only wore it in her hair on very special days. It always reminded her of the little girl playing the harp in her star house, high up in the sky.
Berry and Dolly say, what will we learn today?
The Puppet Show. One sunny summer morning, Berry knocked hard on Dolly's door. It's the puppet show today. Let's go and tell Flutter and Eddie too. Berry and Dolly's first stop was at the pretty butterfly's house. Wake up, Flutter. The fleas are going to give a puppet show. It's Snow White. The little friends stopped in front of the potato beetle's house. Eddie, are you coming to see the puppet show? But Eddie didn't open his door. Hurry up, Eddie, we're going to be late, Berry shouted, but there was still no answer. Flutter gently turned the handle and popped her head inside. Are you still in your pyjamas, Eddie? Berry grumbled. Hurry up and get dressed. I'm not going. My tummy's covered in nasty bites. It really itches, Eddie sobbed.
Let me have a look,
Dolly told him.
They're not bites. You've got chicken pox,
the ladybird girl told her sickly friend.
There's no need to be scared. I've had them already, and I had thousands of spots.
I'll go and get Dr. Owl, Dolly announced. He'll know what to do. Dr. Owl soon arrived and took a good look at Eddie. It's definitely chickenpox. Chickenpox is contagious, Eddie. I'm afraid you won't be able to go to the puppet show. Contagious? Does that mean Berry, Dolly and Flutter are going to catch my chickenpox? No, don't worry. You can only catch chickenpox once, and they all had it last year. You mustn't scratch your spots. There'll be another puppet show, Berry reassured him. Don't be sad. You'll get better soon, Dolly smiled. Berry, Dolly and Flutter said goodbye to the little potato beetle and hurried off to see the puppet show. The puppet show was already set up in the meadow, and the puppeteers were 5 fleas. The curtains soon opened, and the puppet show began. They all watched the rest of the puppet show and clapped loudly at the end. The flea puppeteers came out from behind the tent and took a bow. It's such a shame that Eddie couldn't come with us, Dolly said with a sad smile. I'm sure he'd have really liked it. Why don't we put a puppet show on for him? Dolly suddenly suggested. That's a super idea, Dolly, Flutter said. And the 3 friends were soon all hard at work. Flutter drew dwarves, Dolly drew Snow White and the Prince, and Berry drew the Wicked Queen. Then they cut their drawings out and glued them onto sticks. When they were ready, they all crept under Eddie's window and tapped on the glass. The little potato beetle opened the window and looked out. Let the puppet show begin, Berry announced, and the 3 friends started the show. Thank you, he said. You're the best friends a beetle could have. Dr. Owl came back 10 days later, and all Eddie's spots had gone.
Berry and Dolly say, what will we learn today?
The Canary Chicks. One day, Christopher the Canary met Chloe and they fell in love. Chloe lived in an oak tree not far away from Dolly's house. The new couple built a nest on the most beautiful branch of the tree. Berry and Dolly watched them building their nest from the ground. Look, Chloe's been sitting on the nest for days. Do you think she could be sick? The little snail asked. No, Berry. I'm sure she's going to lay eggs and they'll hatch into canary chicks, Dolly told him enthusiastically. Eggs? Chicks? Berry was confused. Of course. Chloe will lay the eggs in the nest and she'll keep them warm until they hatch, the ladybird said. A few days later, Chloe stood up and as she was arranging things in the nest, Berry noticed 3 tiny eggs. 3! There'll be 3 chicks, he said to Dolly cheerfully. One morning they heard tweeting coming from the oak tree. Hooray! The chicks have hatched, Dolly exclaimed and gave Berry a big hug. Can we take a look at them? Dolly asked Christopher excitedly. Of course you can, but please be careful. They're still very tiny, the proud daddy replied. Christopher let Berry and Dolly hop on his back and he flew them up to the nest. They're so cute, Dolly whispered. The snail and the ladybird carefully patted the baby canaries. The little birds grew very quickly and they were soon ready for flying lessons. Chloe was their teacher and they got better day by day.
We've got to go and get some food. Be good,
Christopher told the chicks one morning. And don't even think about flying out of the nest without us. You're still very small and you can only fly with us, Chloe added. But the smallest chick was rather naughty.
Nonsense! I'm very good at flying. I'm going to try it on my own,
he said, and jumped out of the nest.
You're not allowed! You're not allowed!
Tweeted the other two, but they couldn't stop him. The two chicks were hopping nervously around the nest when their parents arrived back.
He flew off! Our little brother flew off!
They cried. Oh dear, but he's too small. He could be in all kinds of trouble, Chloe cried. Berry and Dolly heard all the fuss and set out to find the naughty chick. They looked for him everywhere, on the hill, in the mountains, by the lake, in the forest and in the meadow, but he was nowhere to be found. How are we going to find him when it gets dark? Chloe asked, and she started to sob. But then, little lights appeared in the sky. The fireflies had come to help them.
We can make light. We'll help you find him,
they said.
There he is! There he is in the bush!
Berry shouted suddenly, and they all ran over. The little canary had fallen asleep in the bush. He was exhausted and shivering. Chloe took him in her wings and hugged him happily.
There you are. You should always do as you're told,
Christopher said. Chloe flew back to the nest with her chick on her back, and the fireflies danced around them like stars in the sky. The canary family was soon back together again. Good night, little chicks, Chloe whispered happily as she kept them warm under her wings.
Berry and Dolly say, what will we learn today?
The Yellow Ladybird. The spring had come at last. Dolly decided it was time to tidy up her flower garden. She got her spade and a rake and tied a pretty dotted scarf around her head. She had only just stepped outside when she heard someone groaning behind her house. Christopher, your wing looks broken, the little ladybird exclaimed.
The sun shone in my eyes and I flew straight into a tree. I really hurt myself,
the canary said. Just then, Berry the snail and Stanley the stag beetle arrived. Stanley, please go and get Dr. Owl. Christopher's wing's broken, Dolly said, taking control. Dr. Owl soon arrived. It looks like a very bad break, he said seriously. Then carefully and slowly he bandaged Christopher's broken wing.
You know, Dolly, Christopher said one day, there's a little ladybird living on the island I come from.
Really? Is she red with black dots like me? Dolly asked excitedly. And what's her name?
She's called Katie. Her back isn't red, it's yellow, but her dots are black like yours. She looks a lot like you. Why don't you come to meet her when my wing's better?
That sounds like a super idea. Can Berry come too?
Of course he can. There's enough room for both of you on my back.
A few days later, Dr. Owl came to visit the injured canary. He was happy to say that Christopher's wing was as good as new. The canary thanked the owl for his help, put Berry and Dolly on his back, and headed for his island home. They soon found themselves flying over a large lake with a little island in the middle of the water.
Can you see it? We're flying to that island. My nest is on top of the highest tree. Hold on tight, we're coming in to land,
Christopher landed perfectly, and Berry and Dolly climbed down. "You can't catch me!" shouted a bright beetle in an orange dress. She was talking to the tiny fleas running after her. "Watch out!" Dolly shouted, but the girl beetle ran right into her. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to knock you over. My name's Katie. Who are you?" "Oh, you're Katie. We're here to see you. My name's Dolly, and I've come a long way to meet my ladybird cousin." "Ladybird cousin?" Katie asked with a puzzled smile. "Yes, you've got black dots just like me, except you're yellow instead of red." "Wow, you're right," the yellow ladybird said. "Come with me and I'll show you my house," Katie said. As soon as they saw Katie's house, Berry and Dolly started to laugh. "My house looks exactly like this, but mine's red." Berry, Dolly and Katie took a long walk around the island. "There's the pine forest with the little stream running next to it. We built the bridge ourselves," Katie explained with pride. "And what's that in the middle of the meadow? It looks like a slide." "That's right. It's a special flower slide. Come with me. I'll show you." "Can I have a go?" "Of course you can. Follow me," Katie said and slid down on the curvy slide. Berry, Dolly and Katie slid down the slide again and again until it started to get dark. "It's getting late. Come on, you two, I'll take you home," Christopher said. Dolly and Katie swapped headscarves as a parting present. "Have a safe trip home," Katie told them. "Do visit me again sometime." It was getting very late by the time Christopher arrived at Dolly's dotty house. The moon shone and the sky was full of sparkling stars.